Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Stephen now, and we are back with another 007 movie review. Today we'll be reviewing the first Bond movie of the 1980s. We're reviewing 1981's For Your Eyes Only. Now before we get into the video, let's of course do a bit of background. Now, the last Bond film of the 70s was Moonraker, and although it was a huge commercial hit, the film was heavily criticized for being too over the top, too cartoony, and basically just too silly. And as a result of that, the producers decided it's time to bring Bond back down to earth. So, For Your Eyes Only was more essentially an old school spy, a bit of a spy thriller, back to past roots. Bond was brought back down to earth. The script was to be, was to move far away from the outlandish gadgets that we've become accustomed to, especially with the Roger Moore films. And they got John Glenn to direct, who had actually been second unit director on previous Bond films in the late 70s, and he would direct all the Bond films of the 80s. And this would be the one he would start off with. Roger Moore, of course, came back after Moonraker, and it was heavily clear that this was going to be his final film, but of course we know from history that didn't turn out to be. And the name For Your Eyes Only was taken from the Ian Fleming short story of the same name, along with another short story called Risiko, which I would personally like for a title for a new Bond film one of these days. There's a few Bond titles from Eon, at least short stories, they still haven't used. Another one is called The Property of a Lady, which I would like for them to adapt one day, but who knows. With that in cast, this film was to pretty much be grounded more in reality, and it was especially the good way to go. Not only because Moonraker was too over the top, but this was the 80s, and for lots of films of its era, it's more action-packed, heavy, but it's mostly set in a bit of realism, at least to an extent. So the question is, how did this film fare? Well, first off, before we get to that and the actual plot, let's get into the cast. Now, the cast for this film, of course, remains steadily, with Roger Moore, of course, back in the role of 007. Now, I want to point out something. I feel that Roger Moore in this film, Bond, is a bit more darker than he usually does, and I feel he absolutely executes it very well. We have Bongo, Carol Bouquet playing Melina Havelock, who's essentially a very unique character in this film, and we'll get more of that as we go through. We have Melosis Colombo, portrayed by Chaim Topol, and he's essentially a Greek smuggler, a gangster, which I really liked. Julian Glover, who portrays Aristo Christatos, a really fun character, but I'm going to explain less about him in the character, because I feel we need to wait that for the actual movie to really understand more, and you'll understand eventually. We have Michael Gotthrod as Emilio Locke, essentially one of the henchmen, along with John Werman as Eric Kringle, who is essentially another henchman. This one and this character. Oh, jeez. BB, portrayed by Lynn Holly Johnson, and she's one of the most annoying characters of this film. Just heads up when going into it. We also have we have Cassandra Harris playing Countess, a conquest Bond will have to do in the film. Literally. Of course, we have many returning favorites. We have, of course, Desmond Llewellyn as M, Goebbels back, Sir Frederick Gray, Miss Moneypenny by Lois Maxwell is back, and we have the Havelocks, the parents of Melina in this film, here and here, who portray enormous plots in the film. We also here have Jill Bennett as Becca Brink is essentially BB's instructor. Hector Gonzalez, a hitman who has a little bit of a plot to the film, and of course we have Tanner for this film, portrayed by James Villas. Now, the reason why Tanner's here instead of M, you see, tragically, at the end of Moonraker, Bernard Lee could not return to the role as M due to his unfortunate passing. So as a result, the filmmakers decided to, out of respect for Bernard Lee, decided not to immediately recast him. So instead, it is that M is on leave, and that the Chief of Staff, Bill Tanner, even though he's mostly referred to as Chief of Staff, not Bill Tanner, is put in his place. Now, Bill Tanner appeared in the novels, from what I've been told, and so his involvement in this regard is essentially just to be M's replacement. And the info I was told, the actor expected to take up the role of M, but that never really happened. Instead they got someone else, but we get to that M in the next film. Anyway, with the cast out of the way, let's get to the plot. Gun Barrel opens up with Roger Moore back, and as a refreshing change of pace, the film doesn't open to, well, it opens at a grave, a cemetery, where Bond is visiting the last resting place of Tracy from On Her Majesty's. This scene is to set continuity. Again, it's often referred to belief from the Sean Connery to the Pierce Brosnan age that Bond was one and the same until Daniel Craig, which was a reboot. I've always, of course, believed that every time there's a new actor in the role, the continuity is just being rebooted. But they do share some continuity, at least some events from the previous film, but they just turned out differently. So I always viewed that Roger Moore did kind of have a similarity with Sean Connery and George Lazenby. He did get married, he did try to, have a life, but that was taken away from him, and that's how I always viewed it. So anyway, it's then ended when the priest comes to tell Bond to, that his office called and it's an emergency, and Bond leaves by helicopter. And here we get to this scene, which I really like. When Bond's in the helicopter, we then see a bald man in a wheelchair petting a white cat. Now, we know who this is. This is Blofeld. But understand this. At the time, the filmmakers could not properly use Blofeld's name, nor the Spectre character, nor Spectre. That wouldn't become until pretty much since they wouldn't have the rights to use that character until 2015, and this was in the early 80s because of Karen McClory still owning the rights to Spectre, so they couldn't do that. But they got away with it by not explicitly saying it's Blofeld, but it's sort of, here it is, you know who he is, even though we're not going to say the name. And so anyway, back to the thing. Blofeld then flips a switch that electrocutes the pilot, and he remote controls the helicopter. Now, I can already see that Blofeld has pretty much lost everything. He's lost his organization, he's lost all his people, all his resources, and he's getting his final vengeance on Bond, and he's taunting him. He's having the helicopter fly around, essentially taunting him, and Bond almost acts like he knows the man. And this is sent as a little fun adventure for the film, and is also to tie up all loose ends from the Connery era, but also to say that the series can continue on without Blofeld. In other words, it's unshackling itself to the past. And I like the scene with the helicopter and Bond on the outside of the helicopter trying to get to the pilot seat. He does end up getting to the pilot seat and takes control of the helicopter. Then he goes after Blofeld, and ironically the cat abandons Blofeld, and the helicopter ends up grabbing Blofeld's chair and lifts him, and as Blofeld is pleading for his life, Bond pretty much dumps him down a chimney, where he falls to his death for good. This was finally to end the saga, because no way Blofeld could come back from that, from a fall. No way he could come back from that. And it was a sort of, and I like the symbolic meaning. This is one of my favorite kills of the series, and I also felt it's really good closure. To the series. At least this tries to give closure to the On Her Majesty's and finally ties up that continuity so well for me. Then with that, we get into the song of the film, From Your Eyes Only, sung by... The song for the film was written by Conte and Michael Leeson, and was sung by Sheena Aston. Okay, now sorry if any of their names were pronounced wrong. Singing this title song, For Your Eyes Only. Now, first off, I like the sort of background image for this one, but I also gotta find this is unique. This, for the first time ever in a sequence like this, we actually get to see the singer actually sing in the sequence. And I gotta admit, I like this song. It's nice and calming. It's good. Now, it's not up there in the top 5 for me, but it's definitely somewhere down the top 10. I just like it, and it's calming, and for me, it's definitely far better than the Moonraker one, which I didn't like as much. This is just a nice song. After that, we then cut to a ship called the St. George's out in sea, and it turns out it is actually a British naval ship. And they have something called the ATAC, which, as we find out, is used to, used to send out signals to the Navy submarine, to the British submarines for coordinating. Next thing you know, Annette has picked up an old school mine bomb and comes close to the ship and causes an explosion, and the ship sinks. We then find out from Sir Frederick that the ship sank, but not in full deep water. And now the Russians know about it and are trying to get their hands on the ATAC. So we're returning back to the Cold War, which I really like. And that's where Goebel comes in. He's kind of heading the team to sort of get their hands on it. And we also, just as we cut to that, we also cut to finding... we then cut to a scene where the Havelocks are out in a marina and essentially are trying to locate something. And their daughter, Melina turns up to give them presents. And just as that's happening, the pilot that dropped Melina off flies around and machine guns the boat, killing Melina's parents. And this sets her character arc for the movie, and just those eyes of grief is just absolutely captivating. So far, we have a bunch of questions. Questions are raised. What the hell's going on? But of course, we cut to the usual MI6 office where Bond does the usual flirt with Miss Moneypenny. Now, I want to halt this. Moneypenny here, by Lois Maxwell. Honestly, this is my least favorite one of the Roger Moore era. Honestly, she doesn't look like she used to. She looks more of a granny, and it's her age is completely noticeable. You could just see it. Anyway, she dropped and also in the scene, however, I will give her credit returning the hat throw, which we haven't seen since the Connery days, and I highly doubt that bit of Bond will ever come back in modern interpretations, but who knows. M then, of course, Moneypenny says that M is on leave, and that the chief of staff is running MI6 until he returns. This is again because Bernard Lee sadly passed away, and out of respect, they decided not to recast him immediately and decided just to use this character instead, which I feel is a nice little paying respect to Bernard Lee, who is a great and fine actor. Anyway, we then go to see the chief of staff, who is a combination of being a little bit of a stuck-up aristocrat, but a very capable man to run MI6. So he's not a full asshole. He's a little bit pompous, but he's not a complete overall bad guy. He's actually quite likable to a degree. Anyway, we also see Frederick Gray is also here, and in this scene, it's revealed that the ATAC, which is a device, of course, for the British Navy, was on a boat called the St. George's, which is sunk. The British then contacted the Havelocks to help locate it. Before a report could be sent into the possible location, they were killed by a hitman named Hector Gonzalez. As that happens, it's also imperative they must find it, because if anyone else gets their hand on it, then they could use the ATAC to attack their own cities. So it will be a very huge brief of national security. Bond is then sent to find Hector Gonzalez, where he goes to his villa, and how Bond gets there is that he is driving his Lotus Esprit. Though it is a slightly different version. I like how Roger Moore is back driving his iconic Bond car. And also, and also at this scene, we also see someone else coming into the villa. Locke. But of course, Bond is smart. He decides to drive the car out back after he knows there's a security camera. He drives the car to the back of the villa and starts essentially doing, stealth and starts sneaking his way in. And when he does, he finds Hector Gonzalez having a meeting with Locke, and Locke is paying Hector a whole bunch of money. For a moment, Bond is slightly looks behind him when he sees someone else is walking through the bushes, but before he can investigate more, he is then caught by Hector Gonzalez's men and is taken to him. Hector says this very cheesy and I could say very cringy line. It basically is saying he knows 007 and he's licensed to kill. And as Bond's taken away, Hector goes to dive off the swimming pool, and during that, a crossbow arrow is fired and essentially kills him just as he lands in the water. Bond then fights his way, taking down the rest of Hector's, knocking out Hector's men, and quickly makes I guess a Roger Moore type escape. But at the same time, it's quite believable. Again, it's set more in reality, and he makes his escape. Locke and his men essentially leave along with the money that they were meant to give to Hector. And just as Bond's making a run for it, he then comes face to face with this mysterious figure that he saw lurking in the around, and that person fires a crossbow, killing one of Hector's men that was behind Bond, and it's revealed to be Melina. Bond then quickly grabs Melina, and essentially they both try to escape. They both go to Bond's car, but like I said, no gadgets for this film. So what happens is, as Hector's men try to get into the car, they set off a self-destruct that both kills the goons, and the car explodes, meaning Bond is not going to escape in his Lotus, and is forced to resort to this very small, very silly car. And it's Melina's car, of course. They quickly make their escape and drive away. Bond then asks how she got there, who she is. She says she got there through a detective agency, and basically that Hector killed her parents. Bond then pieces it together. This is Melina, the Havelock's daughter. And just as they're being chased, Hector's men are chasing them in their cars. There's of course there's a bit of a funny gag with the bus, and Bond then switches places with Melina, with him driving the car. And we get this in my opinion, one of the best car chases of the series. And for me, it's a refreshing change of pace. It has a nice 80s soundtrack, and it shows that Bond, even in this very small and very silly, not even fast car, it shows that he's a capable driver, and he doesn't need a gadget car to outrun his assailants. Of course, he does outrun them with the car essentially knocking themselves out. And of course, Roger Moore says his line, "My name is Bond, James Bond." They then quickly go to the hotel that night, and essentially Melina, even though she's killed Hector Gonzalez, she knows that he was merely the hitman. She wants the people responsible for his death. And of course, Bond tries to talk her out of killing, saying, that revenge is probably not going to bring her closure. I'm guessing that maybe he might know a bit about this, that killing someone out of revenge doesn't fully necessarily make all the pain go away. Maybe that's what he's trying to spare her of, that's how I interpret it, and I feel that's a really interesting way of it. And honestly, Melina is just a really interesting character. She's not at all in love with Bond. She is merely out for pure revenge. And Bond here is trying to help her not go down that path. Anyway, with that scene, which further sets up the plot and sets up her character arc more for the story, Bond is back at MI6, reveals the report. However, he did note that even though Hector is dead, he noticed that Hector was paid, therefore we could find out the person who paid Hector. That could buy us a lead. So, he naturally goes to Q's, base, headquarters. And there, he meets Q working on all sorts of funny gadgets, along with a red version of the Lotus. Then you go through this essentially machine designed to
thanks to Bond's eidetic memory, to describe all the facial features of the guy that paid Hector. And we find out that the guy is, of course, Locke, as I've already said, and is essentially a well-known criminal, and they use that to track to his last known location down in Switzerland, I believe. And there they go to this really nice location, the snow, where Bond meets up both with his contact and Christassos, another contact as well. And he reveals that Locke is actually working for a notorious criminal known as Columbo, known in the underworld as the Dove. And Christassos and Columbo actually go way back. They were in the Greek Revolution during, I think it was World War II. And essentially it was said they were best friends, but after the war they took a different path. Here we also get to see BB, a very annoying character, and there is a scene where BB does try to get Bond into bed. But enough about that said, the bed, I'm sorry. But BB is such annoying, and it's clear that Roger Moore is old enough to be, well, her grandfather. Of course, Melina is also there, trying to find out the people, responsible for killing her parents, and that results in a failed attempt on her life, and Bond manages to help her get out of it, but also tells her to get out, like, he will handle this, but handle this, and when he has more information, he will contact her. Essentially, sort of friendship really starts to blossom here. Nothing romantic, at least how I interpret it, but it's more of a, like a friendship, really, than anything else. And as that happens, Bond, of course, goes skiing, where he runs into another henchman of the movie. A stereotypical blonde henchman, we know who he is. You saw me tell the character in the, the characters for the film. And this kicks off a ski chase, which is a normal one when, essentially, Bond loses his gun and essentially most of his skis, and he ends up having to do this, like, Olympic sport thing in order to temporarily escape, but he's still being chased by the blonde henchman and another thug. And this has a good soundtrack. It's a really fun and interesting chase, and yes, there are some gags in between, but I like how it is very serious and more grounded. There are some gags, such as Bond escaping on bobsled. He takes out one of the thugs, and of course the essentially him crashing along with a thug too through a I guess a barn house. Anyway, but Bond, despite that, manages to escape. There is another scene where he meets with BB at an ice rink. I'm sorry, I really don't like BB. I'm trying to avoid her scenes in this review. She's just an absolute pain. Anyway, there's the scene where men try to attack him in a hockey arena. He manages to escape that, but also he finds Luigi, one of the contacts with him, killed in his Lotus, and in his hands is a dove. After that, Bond then makes his way to Greece, where he meets with Christassos and Melina again, although Melina first, then Christassos, and then he sees Columbo for the first time. And and we also see how smart Columbo is, and Christassos does say that Bond may have to possibly kill him if necessary. Eventually, Bond goes home with Columbus's mistress after, of course, Columbo and her have a falling out. No, the mistress' name is Countess. Anyway, as they leave, then go to her place for essentially a Bond classic rendezvous, I would say. The classic Bond bed set, let's be honest. In the morning, they're walking on the beach, and they get attacked by Locke and a few of the men. Bond manages to take down Locke's men, but Locke makes his escape. But sadly, Countess was one of the victims killed, and Bond was actually saved at the last minute by some divers coming out of the water, who revealed to have this dove on their swimsuits. And what happens, Bond gets knocked out, and he's woken up on a ship. And there, he properly meets Columbus for the first time. And he reveals certain things. A, Locke is not working for him, but is actually working for Christassos, and Christassos is the man he's after. And yes, he said he is a pirate, a pirate, he is a criminal, he is a smuggler, but he never smuggles heroin. So he's a sort of criminal with a code. And he's even told him that Christassos actually played both sides of the war. And Bond believes him. And then, of course, with that newfound friendship and sort of alliance the two have formed, they then go to this warehouse where Locke is and all his men. And next thing you know, Bond, Columbus's men fight Locke and his men, resulting in essentially all Locke's men getting killed, or knocked out, depends on which happened. And they also find some gear that's been hidden in the warehouse, such as a landmine, you know, those old-fashioned water mines, some kind of bizarre diving suit, and Locke tries to make his escape by car, but Bond quickly catches up with him and shoots him in the shoulder when the car swerves off and essentially on the side of a cliff. Now, this is one of the best scenes in the film and really shows Roger Moore's take on doing a dark take on Bond far better than he did in Man with the Golden Gun. Now, originally, what Roger Moore wanted to do was him to, you know, throw that little dove locket that was found in Luigi's hand into the car, and it resulted in the car just falling off the cliff. But John Glenn wanted Roger Moore, after he does that, to kick the car down. And of course, the car falls down, and Locke essentially breaks his neck. It's one of the most iconic kills, not just for the context, but the fact that Roger Moore did it, because he's more known for lightheartedness. And of course, he ends on a one-liner, "He had no head for heights." Bond then meets up with Melina again, and they go essentially diving to find the sunken ship, where they get their hands on the ATAC, but are attacked not once but twice by essentially this mini submarine and this guy in this scuba diver suit. Of course, the scuba diver was the guy that they had to fight first. He got killed, and then the diver was killed, and then the submarine thing was killed. And as they get out of the water and back to the boat, they are surrounded by Christophos, the blonde Russian henchman, and essentially all the other thugs that are on Christophos' payroll. And it's revealed that Christophos is the villain behind the whole thing. He's been hired by the Russians to get their hands on the ATAC. And it turns out all Melina's crew have been killed. And there's this scene which is deliberately taken from the novel Live and Let Die, where Bond and Melina are tied up and are dragged through the ocean in hoping to attract sharks. Of course, yeah, and which is a really good scene. Of course, Bond is smart enough to get his way out of it, and he doesn't use any gadgets. He uses pure both strength, but also a bit of smarts to get out of it. They manage to get out of the trap and make it that Christophos believes they're dead. And of course, Bond and Melina make their way back to the boat. Now here's the catch. What are they going to do? Christophos is gone, they got the ATAC, and they have no idea where he's going to go. But they get one lucky break. You see, if you've seen the film, at the beginning, Melina's father had a pet parrot who always repeated certain words. And he managed to pick up some words that Christophos and his men were saying. Bond then makes his way to a church where he meets Q, who is in disguise as a priest. And it's then revealed where he is, how he is locked up, his hideout is in a monastery. So Melina, Bond, Christophos, and 3 of his goons go to the monastery to get Christophos and the ATAC and take them all down. And this scene that happens is absolutely fantastic. Fantastically shot, no blue screen acquired, and it's really great. Where basically Bond is, you know, having to climb up the side of the monastery bit by bit. No gadget used. It's old school spy sleuth. And the thing is, if he falls, he has no parachute to save him. So literally, his life's in the air in many ways. And of course, there are some missed calls there, and one of the goons, of course, falls off, courtesy of Bond, using some, spy skills, resulting in one of the goons falling off the cliff and falls to his death. Bond then makes his way to this sort of, carriage, I guess you could say, when he would use to pick up Christophos and Melina and the rest of the goons and take them up to the monastery. There, they also apprehend the rest of Christophos' men, and of course rescue BB and the instructor, who of course was there at the beginning of the film as well. They then make their way to Christophos and the Russian blonde henchman, which results in a fight. The Russian henchman ends up getting knocked out a window, and he falls to his death. Christassos tries to make his way with the ATAC, and Columbus is chasing him. Essentially, and I like how it's them two that are fighting at this point, because the two have history, and it's really done well. And they eventually make their way to the top. Now, as this has been happening, Gobel has been coming there too. He's there to deliver the ATAC. And as soon as he gets there, as soon as he arrives, Melina and Bond are there too. Melina has her crossbow ready to kill Christassos, right there, dead on the spot. But Bond says, "Don't. Leave him for the Greek police." She says, "Out of my way." Bond realizes there's no way of talking her out of it, but he does tell her, "You must be prepared to dig those 2 graves." And as Christassos gets his knife out, he has a knife thrown in his back by Columbus, which is the first time ever where Bond doesn't get to kill the main villain, the villain of the film, or at least a villain, really. I mean, Largo was killed by Domino, and here Christassos, who is essentially the main villain, gets killed by Columbus, which makes sense, and I felt that it made sense for Columbus to kill Christassos and not Melina. So in many ways, Melina is spared of going down a dark path, which I think is a really nice way for her to end her arc. Her parents are avenged, and she doesn't become a killer. But of course, General Gobel is still here, and essentially demands to have the ATAC be handed over to him. Bond, not willing to give up the ATAC or give it to General Gobel, decides the only course of action is to throw it, and he throws it, and essentially the whole thing gets destroyed. And in many ways, even though he kind of failed to get his objective to get the ATAC, it's better that it got destroyed than ending up in Gobel's hands, and of course to part ways on friendly terms. I guess Gobel has respected Bond after that. As when that scene wraps up, we get a scene where the Chief of Staff, Sir Frederick Grey, and Q try to contact the Prime Minister, who appears in this. The actual Prime Minister at the time, I think, appears in this, and essentially try to contact Bond to congratulate him, on his mission. And of course, what's Bond doing? Well, having a fun time with Melina. And as those two go to have, well, let's say fun, the parrot is given Bond's watch, and let's just say he keeps saying stuff on the line. And of course, the film ends with the usual "Bond will be back" and Octopussy, with the song of the film and playing in the background. Also, for those who are wondering, Columbo eventually ends up becoming BB's new sponsor. But who wanted to know that? For Your Eyes Only is a really fun film of the Bond series. It's a more back to basics and back to roots, and I like the more revenge-driven story, and it's more down-to-earth atmosphere. And the fact that Bond stripped off his gadgets and he's essentially a spy on his own with the license to kill. It is a classic Bond, what the series always does. When it got too over the top, the series always brought Bond back down to earth, back down to his roots. And I really like it. Roger Moore doing a darker take on Bond. Melina is a fun Bond girl. Even though I might feel that the actress might be wooden in some places, she's a very unique and interesting Bond girl. And the story has a lot of twists and turns, and I like it for that fact. But are there any bad things about this movie? Yes, well, there's BB, who is honestly perhaps one of the most irritating Bond girls I've ever had to watch in a film. Honestly, it's enough to drive my head through. And Columbus is a nice, fun Bond character ally, which I really like. But also another thing is that the villains are kind of forgettable. Christassos is a villain that is totally forgettable, and this is played by Julian Glover, who is a phenomenal actor. Locke is just a silent guy who wears these glasses, and is essentially sort of looks like a banker who became a hitman, and the Russian blonde henchman. How many times must we have that in a film? Seriously, it's almost always done in these films. Other than that, this film is really fun, and of course, you may not like it because you might feel it's bland, but I like that it's set out what it's set to do. Bring Bond back down to earth with a nice case of being, of a more thriller. It kind of reminds you of From Russia with Love, in a way, with the whole Bond trying to get a device, before, you know, out of the Russians' hands. You can't help but feel there is some similarities to that. John Glover here, John Glenn, the director of the film, absolutely succeeded in what he was trying to do. He was trying to bring Bond back down to earth, and he made his staple on the series. And this was a good run for his Bond. For his Bond time directing, and arguably this is one of his best films that he did for the series. This is absolutely great Bond film. Now, as we know, my top 10, last time I checked, it's roughly in the top 15, I think, last time I checked. And it is an okay Bond film. It's set out what it's set to do, and it's arguably, I think, what many would consider the best Bond films of the 80s, the best Bond film of the 80s. I disagree. I think one film is the best one of the 80s. But overall, this film is just great, and you will not be disappointed. And that's it. That was For Your Eyes Only, released in 1981, and kicked off the Bond films of the 80s, proving that bringing Bond back down to earth and getting away from all the campiness. And this was set to be Roger Moore's last film, as he plans to step away from the role after this. You see, what he planned to do, and that was going to be the case. But of course, as we know, 1983, which will be released for the next Eon film, there was another Bond film coming out. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, you see, around this time, there was a rival Bond production to release their Bond film. And as a result of that, they had no choice but to bring Roger Moore back for the 1983 Octopussy, which will be a film we'll be reviewing next in the Bond lineup. So until then, this has been the Steven Hour. Hope you enjoyed this review. Do you agree on what I personally thought about this film? Leave your opinions in the comments, and until next time, so long for now.